tonight with the people to govern. We ask for your guidance and your presence with us in all that we do. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Play ball. Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilman Grubbs.
Present.
Councilman Bastian.
Here.
Councilman Stiltner.
Here.
Vice Mayor Foley.
Here.
Mayor Burnett.
Present. All five of us are here. We have a quorum. With that, would anyone here care to comment on any of the six items on the consent? The items on consent agenda, items 6 through 15. Is there anyone going to comment on that? Robert? Anyone other than Robert? Come on up, Robert.
Mayor, council members, I'd like to speak about item 11, approval of mitigation bank purchase agreement between the city of Port Orange and the county of Volusia. The county has a project called the Southeast Area Landfill Expansion, which they figure that the Florida Department of Environmental Protection is going to expect them to require county to purchase wetland mitigation credits. And the purchase price is $516,000. Now, I'm not real sure what mitigation bank's all about, but it seems to me that if we're going to destroy a wetland one place, then we should be getting money to buy property in another place to offset the wetlands that's being gotten rid of. But for some reason, this credit thing comes in, and so the city is going to get this $516,000. And then the council is authorized to use the net revenue funds for acquisition of real properties for environmental, parks, and stormwater drainage purposes, or capital improvement projects and public park improvements. Although they have to maintain a revenue fund balance of $1 million. So my question is, how are we going to spend that $516,000? Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks, Robert. Anyone else on the consent agenda? There being none, can I have a motion for approval for the agenda for the evening?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion, proper second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There being none, agenda for the evening is approved. Can I have a motion in regards to the balance of the consent agenda itself?
Move to approve consent items 6 through 15.
Second.
We have a motion and a proper second to approve the consent agenda. Call the roll.
Councilman Grubbs.
Yes.
Councilman Bastian.
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Foley.
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 5-0. Consent agenda is approved. You made it easier on a few people in the front row there. Congratulations. Do us proud, Charles. Yeah, well, yeah. Well, you and a few other projects as well, but yours is the biggest. That brings us to public participation agenda. Dr. Rachel Hazels, Deputy Superintendent of Volusia County Schools. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Good evening, Mayor Burnett. Thank you for having us here today, or me here today, to talk about Volusia County Schools. We really want to highlight our partnership with the different cities, and Port Orange is, of course, a very special one to me because I have worked with Port Orange for many years, especially in my role as the former proud principal of Spruce Creek Elementary, probably the best elementary, but don't tell any of the others I said that. But I was very proud of the work.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's a wonderful school. You have wonderful schools, and schools really are the heart of your city. We were just discussing, Mr. Clark, that people move to cities for schools, and we're certainly proud of the ones that we have here in Port Orange. I just wanted to give you some statistics for our beginning of the year. We are now on week 3, minus one day for a hurricane that came through just a little bit, but no damage, and so we're very thankful for that. We have over 63,000 students that we serve. So Port Orange is part of that 63,000 students. We are the 57th largest school district in the nation. And just to put that in perspective, there's over 13,000 school districts in the nation, and we're in the top 100. We have over 87 schools, and that includes our charter schools and choice schools. We have over 8,300 employees, including more than 4,000 classroom teachers. Our vacancy numbers are below 100 for classroom positions right now, which is putting us back to pre-COVID days for vacancies. And so we're very proud of that. We're not taking our foot off the gas as far as hiring goes. If anybody's interested, we are hiring all positions right now, anybody listening. But we are very thankful that we have that. We also have settled our teacher contract for the year. We have 159 bus routes that we drive every single day. 8,114 breakfasts were served just in the first week. That's up 9%. And just a little fun fact, prior to welcoming everyone back to make sure we were fully ready, our custodial crew, which is now in-house, waxed over 3.5 million square feet of floors to get ready and make sure that our buildings were clean.
All to
So-
get tracked up again.
Pretty impressive, right?
Wow.
And we are closely monitoring all of our buildings. We had a practice with the hurricane that came through. We hope we don't have to do that again. We do have a few new legislative rules that we're implementing this year, and one that I wanted to specifically talk about that seems to be a lot of interest, and you may hear about, is the cell phone policy. That is pursuant to House Bill 309. All wireless communication devices will be silenced during the day for classroom instruction so that our teachers can focus on classroom instruction. And that is pursuant to board policy and House Bill legislation that came out. We are looking forward to a wonderful year. You have some of the best schools in Port Orange. You have Horizon, Sweetwater, I don't want to leave anybody out, Port Orange Elementary, Spruce Creek Elementary, Spruce Creek High School, Creekside, and Cypress Creek Elementary on the west. So you really have some of our best, and we're proud to serve. And I'm proud to serve alongside those principals and all of our district staff. So thank you for inviting us and letting us highlight the beginning of the year.
We have
You
10
have-
schools in Port Orange.
You
10
do.
10
10 schools. 10 of the 87.
That's a good chunk of them.
Yep. Yes. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. If not, thank you so much, and I'll be back at the end of the year.
One of the biggest questions I get asked about the schools, like the mayor said, we've got 2 high schools, 2 middle schools, and 6 elementary schools. The growth in southeast Volusia County puts a huge impact on the schools. What does the future forecast and outlook look like for new school constructions, kind of not necessarily just in Port Orange, but that would kind of fit in that area?
So that's a great question. We monitor every single year, and actually multiple times throughout the year. We take what we call capacity reports, where we look at where our buildings are and where we have room and where we don't have room, quite frankly, where we're growing. There's a couple of ways to mitigate that. We can do additions to schools, or we can add brand new schools. The brand new schools require, of course, additional land. And we look very closely at that every year because it impacts not only our buildings, but our people that we have to serve as well. So
are there any new schools on the construction block?
we don't have any brand new
In this
schools
area?
being built right now. We have some renovations that are going to extend capacity tremendously. One, Stark Elementary in DeLand is being rebuilt, and that'll give us a lot more capacity at that school. I'm thinking over on this side, I don't think we have any under construction right now. Tomoka Elementary in Ormond is being rebuilt as well.
Looking forward to the Terry T project being
And
done.
Terry T, yes.
Very good.
Yes, and that will also have a much larger capacity than what.
And I'm just curious, what years were you at Spruce Creek Elementary?
I was at Spruce Creek Elementary from 2013 to 16.
Long after my time.
No, I was not your principal. No.
I didn't think so. But
I might have been your teacher, but I wasn't your
I was
principal.
gonna. I was thinking maybe you taught there before you were
Right.
principal. So.
No, I didn't. I served at George Marks Elementary, Tomoka Elementary, and
Understood. Okay.
Spruce Creek Elementary.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
so
much.
much.
Appreciate you. Citizen participation non-agenda. Tracy, what you got for me? All right. Why don't we let the chamber go first, Barbara?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm here to report out our job fair is coming up on September 14th, and we would really love your support in helping to spread the word. We have about 22 businesses signed up, and each of our cities, for City of Port Orange, Daytona Beach Shores, and South Daytona will also participate. And we really just want to get that out there. Again, September 14th from 12 to 4 at the Riverside Pavilion. And we also invite the citizens that are looking for opportunities, people that are retired and want to go back into the workforce for a second job, high school students, and we are also having apprenticeship opportunities. And apprenticeships are not just for college and high school students, it is for adults as well. The other piece that I'm here to describe and talk about is our leadership kickoff. We have our Leadership 2023 class that is going to be starting Monday, September 11th. And we have a reception that we invite council members to participate. It will be from 5 to 7, and it will be at the C.C. and Hyatt Brown Museum of Arts. And it's, again, 5 to 7. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amazing how she did that in 6 seconds.
First.
Where's Debbie at? You're up. You know, it's always great when you bring reinforcements too, you know that?
Okay, you're good. Hello, my name is Debbie Kruk Forrester, Commander of Ormond Strong, a nonprofit supporting military veterans, first responders, and their families. This is a representation of over 22 U.S. soldiers, including active duty, retired military veterans, and reserves who commit suicide each day. And the same number applies to first responders. However, that number has gone up. It's risen due to the increase of the Custom and Border Patrol agent suicide. This is each day. It's not a week. It's not a month. Every 24 hours, we lose a lot of good men and women. With September being National Suicide Awareness Month, our organization is holding its third annual 22 Hours for the 44 a Day event at the VFW Post 3282 in Port Orange, right here in Port Orange. We love Port Orange. Beginning September 15th at 10 o'clock. We'll begin our vigil raising awareness and support for the American heroes who fell victim to suicide. We'll provide resources, guest speakers, activities, and fellowship for those families and the veterans, all veterans and first responders that were affected by suicide or, have PTSD, etc. We're highlighting the Warrior Path program, which I think is the best program out there, especially for those like Afghanistan, Iraq veterans. I can personally attest to, I endorse it. And we'll have the CEO there, Michael Anthony, that's going to tell about the program. It's also for first responders. With that said, every hour in the hour, a military veteran first responder who fell victim to suicide will be honored during our vigil. Our event will end at 8 o'clock in the morning on September 16th. This event is open to the public. Anyone that wants to participate or has something to offer for veterans, we actually got somebody that's going to teach them to crochet and do different like art type things. Anyway, everybody's invited. I just want to raise awareness and support and let you guys know that this is going on, and we thank you for your support for all military veterans, first responders. I personally know what you've done, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Port Orange.
Debbie, we love you. Thank you.
We love
Thank
you, too.
And this is at the VFW right here in Port Orange.
Yep,
up on
right down the
Williamson.
street. Thank
And
you.
I'm going to ask Wayne if you could take this flyer and have it put on the podium up outside so that anybody leaving that wants to take a picture of it and have the information, they get off of that.
Thank you. And these are two veterans. This is my husband, Afghanistan, but he started in Desert Storm, and Glenn, that is Vietnam era veteran that are here helping me.
Can I ask all the veterans in the room just to stand up for just a second?
Absolutely.
Appreciate y'all.
Debbie, thanks for everything you do.
Thank you.
Debbie's been an amazing supporter for veterans in Volusia County, like you rarely will ever see. And would you just come back up to the mic for just one quick second, because I want you to give out the contact information so the people that are out there watching, I know you got a phone number and an email address. If people want to get a hold of you,
Yes.
to help out. Why don't you tell
Okay,
them how to
so
do that?
Debbie, 386-566-3685, or Ormond Strong, Oscar, Romeo, Mike, Oscar, November, Delta, Sierra, Tango, Romeo, Oscar, November, Golf @gmail.com.
Nicely done.
I can't believe I did that. But
That's
anyway,
good.
thank you very much.
Thanks, Debbie.
Good job.
All right. Luis? Still want to come up?
We're going to have a test later for the proper military phonetic alphabet.
Yes.
Hi, I'm actually, I'm not impressive like the rest of our speakers,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I did want to address some drainage issues, and I wanted to support what you're doing and encourage you to do more, because having been in Volusia County for 36 years, working in 3 county parks and I was on the environmental council for a long time. We used to have berms and swales, which were a cheap way to reserve water and keep from flooding. And I would just like to encourage us to take another look at the whole of Port Orange and its drainage since we've grown, since we're 4. You know, when I moved here, Clyde Morris was a 2-lane. I was not in the floodplain. I was not. Now I have PTSD every time it rains. I don't know about the rest of you. So, but I do want to commend you for the cleanup during Ian. I'm still not finished recovering my house, but I will say that you were there picking up stuff. The people from the city were there and working with us, because it really was a major event. So thank you, and I've got the right names to call now.
You
And
got Juno's card, so.
yes, and also I thank you. I wanted to just tell you one other thing educationally, is that I didn't know if you knew that for Envirothon, Spruce Creek High School went to the national, came in 4th behind Canada. They actually flew to Canada this year, and there were teams from China and all over the world.
Interesting.
So they did a fabulous job, and they're really great. So your partnership and support of that has been a great thing. Thank you.
Have
Thank
you
you.
ever counted the number of kids you've, or at least tried to figure out the tens of thousands of kids who you've touched in Volusia County schools with your service? Yeah, I mean, it's got to be in the
So
tens
it's
of
like
thousands.
34 years I've been running the programs in the parks and the county environmental centers, and probably 4,000 to 5,000 a year. And now they're all grown up running environmental, like the people that run Marine Discovery, the people that run the Beach Patrol. They were all my students, so it's hard to go anywhere. I guess I'm getting 100. When you're 110, you know, everybody's got a job now in the environmental
You
field.
started when you were 3. But
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I got Gina Hesh.
Hi everyone. My name's Gina Hesh. I've been in Port Orange for about 8 years now, and I live on a dead end street, and when I bought the house, I knew the guy across from me had feral cats. It's a feral. I don't hate animals. I love animals. I feed the squirrels until I find out it's a wild animal, and you stop feeding them, they'll chew your screen up. So stop feeding them, you know. So the guy across the street, he started with 13. Well, he's down to like 8 now. He feeds them twice a day. Follows them down the street to feed them. They spray at my house. They defecate in my house, in my yard. They don't bury it, so it's there. And now they got into my boat. I worked hard all my life. I'm not a rich person. I worked in a grocery store for 30 years. You know, saved all my money. You know, married my love. You know, 4 years ago, and we have a nice boat. Well, the boat was covered. That cat got in there, scratched up some wires, and there's hair and stuff all in the boat. I mean, the feral cat owners, they want to feed the cats. They need to be responsible all the way, not just feeding them. They don't clean up after them. They, you know, the damage that they're doing, the spray, even you know, he gets them all fixed and shots and everything, they're still spraying. You know, you go out there and you go to take your trash out and your hand has the spray on it. I mean, it's just, we need to change some laws, and I need to know what we need to do to start changing some of the laws, because if they're feeding a wild animal, feral means wild, then they need to be totally responsible for those animals. I know the laws hadn't been changed, I think since 2020, so 3 years now it's been going on, and I know I'm not the only one. I might be the only one that wants to say something. I got my neighbor to come and say something also, but I know I could get petitions if you need them or whatever you need. I think if they're going to want to feed the cats, they need to be responsible and for the damage also.
Okay.
Thank you for
Thank
listening
you.
to me.
Thank you, Jen.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I have Jeff. I'm going to butcher your last name, and I apologize in advance. Jeff Croraj.
You were close. Very close. Very close. Good try.
I would have gone with Jeff K.
Good try.
Chicken.
Hello, Mayor and Commissioners.
Just do me a favor. Go ahead and give me your name for the record.
My name's Jeff Crumry.
You were very close, man. That wasn't bad.
Yeah. I live at 328 Jane Ann Street. Lived there for 27 years now. I'm here also to talk about the cat problem that we have on Jane Ann Street. The resident we're talking about lives at 323 Jane Ann Street, which is directly across the street from me. This problem has been going on for a long time. I think we finally decided we needed to get a handle on it. My understanding is he has a registered cat colony, so he's registered. But when I looked over the policy, the city policy, I believe he's not following that policy. There's things he's doing that he shouldn't do. So what I'm asking if I can get in contact with animal control, and they can contact me or Miss Gina or anybody else in the neighborhood, and we can discuss the issues that we're having. I think that would be the best way to deal with this. I don't blame the cats. It's not the cat's fault. You know, we all have that one neighbor, and we have that neighbor. And but as a result, I mean, I don't blame the cats, but as a result, these cats are, again, spraying, defecating, thank you, Commissioner, damaging things, you know, on your cars and, you know, doing all that stuff. Hey, I worked hard my whole life. I want to keep the stuff I have, and I just don't think it's fair that these cats are doing this stuff. All right, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate you listening.
Jeff,
thanks,
Thanks for your
Jeff.
hard work. Thanks to
Appreciate
staff for the hard work. Appreciate
Well,
it.
I've got your contact information, both of you,
Alright.
so staff will be reaching out to both of you guys.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Tracy, that's all of them?
Yes.
Okay. Council comments. Let's start with the newly elected. Congratulations, Mr. Grubbs.
Thank you. So, one of the things that over the last 10 weeks of fun going through elections is listening through the world of social media. And you gotta love it, you gotta hate it, but you also have to respect it as much as you can. with listening to everybody's citizen base inside the city. One of the things that I noticed out of all of it was not the education, but the information that people had being a lot of right, but a lot of wrong. So in that, for council minutes as I move forward, it's trying to make sure that I use my council minutes appropriately by educating. And one of the main questions that has been posed to me over the last major 2 weeks is dealing with dispensaries. How many dispensaries does Port Orange need? Why did y'all elect dispensaries in? Well, the reality is we didn't. State legislation law. It has nothing to do with council, and in saying that, I also want to make sure that I'm not speaking out of tune with how I digest dispensaries, because it's not what I want in my neighborhood, but it's what the law is that allows them to come in. So to make sure that it's clear and it's on the minutes, and we end up with YouTube and people come back out later and going, y'all said this, where's it at? It's on YouTube. It's a wonderful thing that Port Orange has the availability to video these, so all citizens can come back and watch these, so they can educate. And when social media pops its head up and starts blasting us, that we have the education base out there that everybody hears about it. So one of the first questions I have to pose is for Mr. Jones, city attorney, is what is the actual actions of dispensaries of what we can do as council, or what is the law?
So like you mentioned, 2016, this is actually, it was voter driven. It was a supermajority of voters that passed Amendment 2 in 2016. The legislature then implemented rules in 2017, basically leaving the cities in a position to either ban them completely or to allow them, and if you allow them, you were to treat them as you do other pharmacies. And that's what the city of Port Orange elected in 2017, and that's what we've done. There are regulations at the state level that they have to follow to get licensed to open, including distance buffers between schools, between each other. But the city is preempted by the state as to what regulations we can impose, and those regulations cannot be more stringent than what we have in place for pharmacies, just like Walgreens, Publix, any of your pharmacies out there.
Okay. So it goes back to, why we have them popping up on corners. Well, if it's zoned for that, we can't change that. And that is the rules and regulations as we have it today. Hopefully that helps. Everybody has just been pounding me for the last 2 weeks after an election about these, so let's go and find the information out and be able to deliver that information to you. So hopefully that's helpful. So,
Supply and demand. Apparently there's demand out there. I search me out why there's ample demand, but apparently there is right here in our town. So,
yep.
You good?
Good.
Read what you got this week.
Well, first off, congratulations, Tracy, on winning your election and being stuck with us for the next 3.5 years. So, but congratulations, man. I know you had to fight hard. I know it was a close one. It was a really hard-fought election. The only thing I was going to bring up is just I noticed in the weekly that here at City Center we have a new thing called a storybook walk, and I'm not entirely even sure how that came about. I understand the library had something to do with it, but it's really neat if you have kids or grandkids. You can walk around the park, and each post has a couple pages, and you can read as you go. I thought it was a great idea. It's just one more thing added to our city center that makes it special, and eventually I'd like to see us try to do those maybe at more of our parks. I could think Bushman would be a good one. Riverwalk would be a great one. I just think it's a fantastic idea, so I don't know exactly where that brainchild came from, but I'd like to congratulate Parks and Rec and whoever else was involved in touching that, because I absolutely love it. I think it's great.
Scott, what you got?
I'm going to actually piggyback on Councilman Grubb's comments there for a minute. So that first of all, if anybody ever really wants to get involved and learn a lot more about municipal government and what municipalities really can and cannot do, we have an awesome program in our city called Port Orange University.
Yes.
I highly encourage you to look for it. You can talk to our public information officer. He's around here somewhere. There he is, right there. Why don't you stand up for just a second? We, got a lot of folks in here. This gentleman right here is our public information officer. If you guys have questions about stuff like that, he's a great resource for that. He runs the program. I highly encourage anybody who would like to attend. I know we got some graduates in here tonight that have gone through it, but you can sit on my thanks, Mike. And so what Tracy's talking about is something that comes up and I get asked a lot about as well. It's not just dispensaries.
Storage
It's
units.
McDonald's, Wendy's, Wawa's, gas stations. And one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is that we don't decide if a business is a McDonald's, a Wendy's, a Taco Bell, a new Del Taco. Those are business owners. In the United States of America, in a free market enterprise, people can buy land. Land will have a very broad zoning designation. Then those landowners and those business owners, those folks that are going to take those financial risks to try to make those businesses work, whether it's a car wash or a storage unit or what have you, that's up to them in the market, which is the people. And it will succeed or it will fail. And if it fails, the land zoning will stay the same in most cases, and somebody else will take a shot at this. And one of the dispensaries I've gotten a lot of questions about used to be a bank.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we've seen in America, all over America, there are fewer and fewer brick and mortar bank locations, and those buildings and properties are being taken up by the next business idea. And like Mr. Jones talked about, the voters in the state of Florida approved this, and this is what the voters by majority, whether we all said yes or no individually, doesn't matter. It's the majority of the vote that this was the kind of thing we wanted to see in our state. But it also applies with other things, whether that's certain types of restaurants or whatever. I hear that from time to time. I know we've got a new grocery store chain that's going to be coming soon to Port Orange called Aldi's. That's going to be out on the west part of the city, and it's going on a piece of property that's been zoned for this for a really, really long time. Most of the property, by the way, I don't think the entire time I've been on city council 9 years, I don't think I've ever been part of an initial land zoning at all. Most of the property in East Volusia County, for sure, all received its primary and secondary land zoning designations back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Future land use.
I was still in grade school.
Place
but
decades.
yeah.
Where was I, Scott?
Right,
Don't
yeah,
answer.
I know where you were. You were a dream.
that-
But anyway, so those are the kinds
Where
of
was I?
Not even.
those are the kind of things that that we get a lot of questions about, or we just hear from time to time. People say, "I can't believe the elected officials are letting them build another McDonald's." Well, it's not about allowing them to build another McDonald's. They have a right to build it if it meets the land zoning designation, and that's where that person decides they want to try to make a living or invest their money. So, and we get that too, because we share some of those same frustrations just as residents as well. We see certain businesses, we're like, man, I wish that would have been this or that or something else, but it's not our personal money to do that. And certainly the city of Port Orange, we don't have a program where we reach out and seek out anybody to come to our city to open up medical marijuana dispensaries. We don't seek anybody to come out and open up a Wawa gas station either, and things like that. So, but anyway, great points. My point to that is people that really, really want to learn more and more about the city, I think that Port Orange University program is a really good program that people should sign up for if they have interest, and it's free, and it's really a great time, and you get to meet a lot of new folks. That's all I got tonight.
Okay, not bad. Drew, what you got?
Only thing I wanted to mention, one of the, Mr. Reinhagen brought up a point about the wetland mitigation credits, and so an example of something we could do with those funds. This project isn't related to that, but it is an example. Item 14 further down on the agenda, we're purchasing a property on Devon Street to relocate a lift station that has failed and flooded multiple times. And so, like I said, we do evaluate that, and it happens. And it just so happens that on tonight's agenda, we approved the purchase, and it's going to allow us to keep that property green and relocate a lift station. It'll raise it up and hopefully keep it from flooding in the future.
Okay.
And that's all I got.
I know that we're going to talk about drainage, the proposed $15 increase to drainage here shortly, but Wayne, I just wanted to thank city and your city staff. You guys were very on top of making sure that we had sand and sandbags and things available last week. We like it when hurricanes become an exercise. I like it when, whether it's a desktop exercise or an exercise in preparation, I like it when it works out the way it did. The lesson we learned from Ian is when you're in the cone, I don't care if you're on the edge of the cone, when you're in the cone, it doesn't matter. You keep. And certainly we've never been hit with a storm like Ian before, and hopefully never will again. But beyond that, we've also learned that just because the cone shrinks doesn't mean the storm is shrinking. Some storms are tight and small and fast moving. Some of them are bigger and slower moving. The cone shrinking is just an increase in confidence of the forecast path of the center line. That's all that is. So I just wanted to suggest to everybody that of the thousands of sandbags that we had go out last week, there is still almost 3 months. I hate saying this. Almost 3 months left of hurricane season. So don't take the sand and even out your yard just yet. Hold on to them. 3 more months, and heaven forbid, there's another incident, then you won't have to get into that massive line again. So hold on to your sandbags, okay? So that's my message with that. Wayne, thank you and your staff for being on top of this. Hopefully the next time we have to do this is nothing more than an exercise as well, but preparation. With that, the board appointments, interviews, and reports. We have one opening for the Environmental Advisory Board, item 18, for a opening that will run through May 7th of 2026. We had one applicant. Is Glenn Smith here?
He is here.
Good. Now, you realize this doesn't come with a lot of pay and benefits.
I understand that. I just want to give something back to the community. I've been in Port Orange now for 3.5 years. I grew up right around the Chesapeake Bay area, so I'm kind of familiar with some of the tree and the landscape and pervious surfaces. Because at one time, the Maryland governor, they wanted to give you the rain tax, if you ever heard of that. So, but I wanted to serve something,
You
so
want to know.
yeah. I wish you'd take my application into consideration, and thank you. Any questions?
Well, I can't complain about one of your references. Well, actually, 2 of them, the Macalusos,
Yeah, John's here.
I appreciate the fact that you have their blessing, which helps and goes a long way. Council, you have any questions for?
Just a thank you for your interest to serve.
All right.
Much
Yep.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
All right. Have a good night.
At this point, nominations are now open. Are there any nominations to fill this appointment?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Smith to be appointed.
Second.
We have one nomination for Mr. Smith. Do we have any other nominations? There being none, nominations are now closed. We have one nomination for Mr. Glenn Smith to serve on the Environmental Advisory Board for the term to expire on May 7th of 2026. Call the roll.
Councilman Grubbs?
Yes.
Councilman Bastian?
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Foley?
Yes.
Mayor Burnett?
Yes, 5-0. With that, you're hired. Appreciate you willing to serve. The public hearing portion of our meeting is now open. We have second reading of ordinance number 2023-10, the Riveryard Master Development Agreement and Conceptual Development Plan. If I can blow that up. Ordinance number 2023-10 is an ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, approving the Riveryard Master Development Agreement and Conceptual Development Plan for approximately 12.4 acres located within the planned community Port Orange Riverwalk PCR District, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Move to approve ordinance number 2023-10.
Second.
We have a motion, proper second. The item is open on the floor for discussion. Second reading. Council, any comments or questions in regards? We had a couple of minor things on the consent agenda that went along with this also. There being none, would anyone here care to speak to the item? There being none, Charles doesn't want to come up and talk us out of it. That's a good thing. Council, final comments or questions? There being none, call the roll.
Councilman Grubbs,
Yes.
Councilman Bastian,
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Foley,
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 5-0. That brings us to Resolution 2331, Stormwater Drainage Utility Annual Stormwater Fee Rate Increase. Resolution number 23-31 is a resolution of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, adopting a rate fee schedule for the annual stormwater utilities imposed by the city in accordance with Chapter 74, Section 156 to 164 of the City Code of Ordinances, describing the unit of measures for the stormwater fees, providing for collection of the stormwater fees as non-ad valorem assessment pursuant to the tax bill collection method authorized by Section 197.3632 of the Florida statutes, approving the non-ad valorem assessment roll for such fees for the fiscal year ending September 30th of 2024, directing certification of such roll to the Volusia County tax collector, and providing for an effective date.
Move to approve item number 2023-31.
Second.
We have a motion proper second. The item is open and on the floor discussion. Wayne, who do you have here?
Before we get over to John, I'm going to go through a little presentation on the background. We went through a series of fee studies over the course of the spring. There were 3 or 4 different workshops where we talked about a variety of fees, this being one of them. So the company, Raftelis, that did the fee study for us is here in the audience, and John, who led that effort, is here. But before we move into that, I've got a PowerPoint going through how we use that fee and what value it provides to this community. It builds off the conversations we've had recently. There were neighbors here from Sugar Forest one week and from Sleepy Hollow in another where we talked about it, but we didn't really have visuals and graphics, and it all kind of blends together before this, which is why the request for the $15 increase tonight is in front of you. So Robin's going to run the PowerPoint from down there. We can start. The first thing that it starts by showing is the actual team when they put it on the screen. There it is. All right, so this is our stormwater team. These are the guys assigned to the stormwater division of the Public Works Department. So these are the people who are out every day working in the ditches and on the pipes, maintaining our streets to make sure that the stormwater works. It's important that these are real people who are out there working hard every day taking care of our community. They do quite a bit of work for a fairly small workforce. When you start going through the slides, you'll see the amount of infrastructure they're responsible for maintaining. So if you go to the next slide, what I wanted to do here is go over the stormwater drainage system. Now, every one of these slides could probably end up being a detailed workshop discussion in itself. I'm going to talk about these at the broad manager level. If you want to go into that level of detail at some point in future workshops, we're happy to do so. But one of the things that we thought is important here is that I think that a lot of people don't understand how the drainage system actually works in the city. But one of the things that we discussed a few months back when there was conversation about the road network, I think there was a lot of surprise when people found out that 80% or so of all the trips in the city took place on state and county roads. They weren't roads that are maintained by us. Our drainage system features a series of ponds, pipes, ditches, and major drainage canals. And so what this graphic is showing you, the larger bolded color lines that you see are the major drainage canals that drain our city. Most of them run north to south. Most of them gravity feed. Vast majority end up in Strickland or Rose Bay, so they're tidally influenced bays. The color codes show you who's responsible for maintenance of those large canals. So the yellow is the county, the green's the state, the dark blue is us. So you see from looking at that, of those major drainage canals, how the maintenance responsibility works out. I've got some other statistics on the side. I'm going to go through all of them, but you see of the ponds that are there, only about 20% of the ponds are actually maintained by the city. If you look at the pond distribution, and it may be hard on some of the little screens to see, but on the big ones, we've color-coded the pond. So the aqua color, the ones that look like the Miami Dolphins, or Drew's shirt, or the private ponds, and then the ones that are the darker blue are the city ponds. And if you look at that, you'll see the pattern. The vast majority, there's way more ponds over on the west side of the city than there are over on the east side of the city. In fact, we ran an analysis of how much of the land area of the city is actually made up of retention pond, and in the city as a whole, it's about 5%. West of 95, it's 10%. So double the amount of land in the newer parts of the city is dedicated to retention ponds to hold that water. So as you see that pattern, you'll see that as we move forward and how the system works and where it works best and where the challenges are going forward. And I also put in here, just so you can get an idea of how many, even though the big canals are mostly maintained by others and not the city, there is a large amount of smaller ditches, pipes, and canals that are maintained by the city in addition to other infrastructure. One more thing before I move from here, though, to help understand, is you see the major north-south. So B19 is the one over on the left. Nova Canal is over on the right side. They pull water in from communities to the north of us. So the 19, which is the west side of the city, the one that starts on the orange, comes actually from the Daytona Airport and brings water all the way down. You can see as it gets to Willow Run, it picks up water coming from the west side of the city and pulls it down. It actually goes behind LA Fitness and BJ's in that area and out into that canal from that area. There's not as much of that area that experiences flooding as the one on the eastern side. There were some challenges in that area, particularly the lower line mobile homes. The bigger flooding problems we have happen on the east side. All those canals that come down, the B19 or the B23 and the Nova, as they go into Rose Bay, the challenge we have there is that's a tidally influenced bay. So you've got a canal having water come downstream, and it hits that bay, and the bay, when the tide is high, so half the day, the bay is pushing against it, and that water cannot get in and get out. And you have a hurricane like Ian, where the wind it's spinning below us to the south, and then it turns and goes up the coast. Almost the entire 36 plus hours we were getting that 20 inches of rain, the wind was blowing from the ocean inland, holding that water up and keeping it from getting out. So the biggest challenge we have is all those smaller pipes, ditches, and ponds, the ones that are not in enclosed basins, outfall into these big canals, and they get down to these blocking points when the tide's high and the water can't get out. And as it sits in those canals, it just overflows the banks and finds the lowest points. So that's our big picture system. We have very little drainage that gets directly into the river. The river flows south, and if you can get the water in the river, it will go away. But we don't have a whole lot of our water that goes into the river, which you'll see with some of the suggestions going forward is one of the things we're going to try to do in the future. So if you go to the next slide, this is also an important understanding of our system, the history of development in the city. So what the purple shows is areas that were built before 1990. So more than half of the city's homes were built before we had detailed stormwater regulations in place as a city. Up into the 80s, there weren't stormwater regulations, so most of the neighborhoods drained to the streets, and the street held the water. You see that pattern when you looked at all the ponds. There's not a lot of ponds over in the eastern side of town, certainly not compared to the western side of town. And we had a tremendous amount of growth in the 80s. So there was intermittent ponds, and there were some intermittent changes as the St. Johns River Water Management District started to have authority to require permits. But it wasn't until 1990 that we actually had a specific standard in place that you couldn't build, whether it's redevelopment or new development. So the logic behind it, so you can see, you're beginning to see the pattern. This is how the system works. We have a gravity issue, we have tidally influenced bays, and we have about half the city built prior to modern stormwater standards. And go to the next slide, and this shows where we've seen the flooding impacts. This is a generalized history of the flooding. The reason you don't see exact specific properties and you see some general purple is some of this came from windshield surveys after the storm, some of it came from damage assessment done by staff afterwards. The one column that talks about the NFIP payouts, this is people who were actually that have flood insurance that submitted and got funds back from their flood insurance. So that's how many people were in the flood zones with flood insurance. But you see the numbers, and it gives you an idea of what an outlier storm Ian was. You know, of all those storms going back through the years, even if we're off 10 or 20 homes on these things, the difference in Ian compared to everything else is tremendous, and it's a stunning number. What happens when you get 20 plus inches of rain over 30 plus hours with all that tidal influence and wind. But looking at this, so you begin to see what our challenge is trying to fix the drainage system. So if you can go to the next slide. a lot of people want to know, what do you do with this money? So you're taking this money from us, what do we get for it? What is the value? And there are several things here. So number one on the top is we take care of what's already there. So the ditches, the pipes, all the infrastructure and the structures that are in there. We inspect all of it every year. We do maintenance as warranted. In some cases you can go and inspect, but they don't necessarily need repairs. But I'll go through the maintenance, and then I'm going to go through a series of improvements. So you maintain what you have, and you consistently work on building on and making the system better going forward. So going through the system, so we have ways to get into the pipes. The machine we're showing there basically uses water to push the debris out of the pipes, and then a vacuum gets in and sucks out as you get it to the edges, to the stormwater features. In certain cases, we do have some pictures. You'll see there are people standing in the water. Every now and then there's not a tool for the job, and sometimes the best tool is one of our guys to go stand out there and walk around in the flooded water and help out. So we have this piece of equipment, expensive piece of equipment, difficult to maintain, difficult to operate. One of the other things that's important about the pipe system, so corrugated metal pipe was the go-to material to use for pipes a number of years ago. The 80s was probably our biggest growth period in the city's history. There are about 6,000 houses built in the 80s alone. But 20% or so the total house, a large number of houses, and this was the predominant material used to build the stormwater system. It does not do well in the salty environment of the coast, and we're having some issues with it. We have an ongoing and consistent project to replace all of it. There's about 25 miles of it still left. Where these pipes exist under the road, it's even particularly more important to get in there and get them replaced, because if one of those pipes fails, the road goes with it, and you're not just digging a hole in the ground to pull up a pipe. Now you're repairing a major road in addition to the inconvenience. We have been asking for legislative funds to do this for years. It is an ongoing, we expect at least 10 more years to get all of that corrugated pipe pulled up out of the ground, but it is a constant and ongoing thing that is funded by the stormwater utility fee. And the next slide is how we get in and do ditches. We have a variety of equipment to do this as well. Very complex pieces of equipment, hard to operate. It takes a good skilled operator to run these pieces. Got to be careful not to hit wires and pipes and everything when you're in there. We have different size equipment, so it allows you to get, we have one piece that it's kind of built like it's got claw feet so it can crawl around and get in there. It's like a mountain goat almost. We've got another one with rubber tires, and we've got a larger piece of equipment that can go down the major roads and has a bigger scope to clean from. It's pretty harsh on these, the conditions of keeping these things inside ditches in Florida. It's very difficult to keep them operating and running. They've got a lot of hydraulics in them. And when they break, it takes a while to get the parts to fix them. So they're expensive pieces of equipment. There's not a rental program where you can have one ready when one of them breaks down. But we have these equipment, and this is also the cost of the equipment, the cost of the operators, the cost of the maintenance, the cost of the parts. All of that's part of this fee. And then we have our inlets, wear and tear, trucks, vehicles, people hit them, bust them up. Same thing, we got to get in there and do repairs to those. Next slide. And then there's just general cleaning along the edges, making sure that we don't have debris getting in there. Occasionally it's a person job. You send humans in to take care of it. And then the next slide talks about our street sweepers. We have two street sweepers that go up and down the streets. Particularly proud of the operators of the street sweepers. You can send them out in the morning. They go out on their own. Instead of just doing their job and driving the streets, they come back and report which neighborhoods have the largest amount of leaves. They can tell you which neighborhoods need to get hit more often. There are certain neighborhoods you may go to every 2 or 3 weeks, but there are certain neighborhoods you need to be in almost weekly. And these guys have come back and helped us devise a system to hit to the hardest hit areas. So that's a very big value for us, having them out there telling us where we need to get going on maintenance. So that summarizes maintenance. That is a critical component of what this fee does, is it funds all of that maintenance of our existing system. Maintenance isn't enough. We obviously understand that when storms hit, certain people have had water impacts and floods, so we got to improve the system too. Not enough just to maintain it, we got to do more. The next couple slides will go through short-term improvements, mid-range and long-range. These are 11 projects that have been in the Stormwater Capital Improvement Program over the last decade or so, to show that we have been methodically working on projects over time. The next slide shows, this is what we've been talking about most recently. So these are the 6 current projects that have come out. Some of them are on the books, others are post-Ian. about $50 million worth of projects in here, the largest being the Nova Canal project. One of the biggest things we've talked about, our challenge, is we have no major way to get the water from the canals into the river and away from tidally influenced bays. And so this project is intended to use a pressurized pumping system that would push the water out into the river so that it could continue to move on and out of the way even when the tide's high or the winds are blowing against us. We could go on for a while on this, but these projects are in the conceptual stages. They have not been engineered and designed. Some of them are simpler than others, but these are the existing projects that are going to come up in the next decade or so. And then the final slide of this part shows the master plan. So earlier this summer, council authorized an update to the stormwater master plan. It's supposed to be done 25. It'll go from 25, 20 years out and help us both with regulations, with prioritizing projects, building off of focusing on the ones that bring the greatest return and the greatest value. And so we're looking forward to having that for the long range. And then the next slide, so this is the concluding slide I have before we start talking about the actual fee. So the current fee, right now, everybody pays $115 per single family unit. That's essentially 3,000 square feet of paved surface. So it's typical for a house, and if you take that amount of surface in a commercial area and multiply the 3,000 times however many they cover. Right now, everybody's paying $115 per single family unit. They've been paying that since 2017. It was $100 about, was it 2005, I think, when it went up to that. And so right now that generates, the 115 generates $4.5 million a year. With the $15 increase proposed tonight, that takes it to 5.1. So you get an extra $600,000 to do all the stuff we were showing earlier. We don't just say, let's take this fee and fund it. We are aggressively trying to find other money sources to help pay for stormwater. It's very expensive to get in there. It's very land intensive. You've got to buy big pieces of land. You've got to buy rights of way. You've got to buy expensive equipment. So between legislative appropriations, we are an entitlement city for CDBG. So we're using our entitlement funds for stormwater. The state of Florida has created something called Resilient Florida. Will be eligible for those monies. When people are impacted by storms, FEMA and the CDBG disaster recovery funds are available. They can be slow in coming. They're small, one house at a time kind of things, but we'll look for that money as well. One of the things I think is important about this budget that is unique is the stormwater fund itself is heavily focused on operating cost and capital cost. So only about 17% of that money is paid for people. Most of our other departments, you hear this when we talk about the budget all the time, about 80% or so is personnel heavy. This is very small. Most of this money goes into buying the equipment, maintaining the equipment, buying the parts, and building the projects that we talk about. So the additional fee would follow that same ratio and proportion. And so with that extra funding would also be focused on fixing projects, building new projects, and maintaining what we have. So I just thought that was important to go over the background of our drainage system, the challenge we have getting into the east side, mostly built out. There's no land there. So when you saw the land area that's used up for ponds on the west side, that land doesn't exist on the east side to go back in and retrofit all those ponds. People's houses are there, businesses are there. So it's going to be a pretty good challenge to get in there and find the land to fix this stuff. But we're going to go out there and do what we can to make it better going forward. So that's our background and what the fund's used for and the value that it provides to our resident and what we plan to do with it if council approves the additional funds tonight.
Yeah, in regards to I do appreciate the fact that we're talking about a $15 increase now, and then we have the oversight to make sure that we're spending it and getting our dollars value out of that before we, over the next couple of years, as we've talked about what that would take with future increases. Future councils will have that ability of oversight if we're getting our money's worth and we're heading in the right direction. I would think and hope that we would continue that. But it's about oversight as we step this in gradually, the increases, and at the same time do it in a manner that takes away a little bit of the sticker shock. $15 a year isn't a ton of money, but I want to know what I'm getting for my dollars, and that's the more important thing. And I appreciate this this overview. Now you're going to get into the dollars. Well, I tell you what, before we go any further, why don't we just run through council, see if we have comments or questions where we are right now. Tracy?
Nobody likes raising things, but, you know, after we go through several hurricanes and had last year's debacle, we know that we're needing a fix. And all of us have talked about it time and time again, and fix isn't going to be relatively available. It's not going to be instantaneous. And 20 inches of rain, having a fix for 20 inches of rain is never going to also be a thing that's going to be able to do either. I think we need to really realize that. But we can try to mitigate as much as we can with what we have.
And I want to know that we can handle 10 to 12.
Correct. You know, 10 to 12 would be a lovely thing not to have any flooding, but 20 inches is
24.
100-year storm, you know. So to say that we're going to promise you that we can handle 20 inches, I don't think that's realistic. I think everybody needs to understand that going into this. What we're asking for is a raise of $15 a year, which is $1.25 a month. It needs to happen. I'm backing it, just for the simple fact that we are dealing with water in homes from the 1970s and 80s. And the properties that are being built today on the west side are going to be protecting the ones on the east side. And it's a community-based tax. And I've heard people the last 2 days, even when Labor Day, saying things, and makes you wonder where their thinking is why am I paying for somebody else's home and water problem? Well, it's a community. It's what we live in. And I think we need to be compassionate about that and let the city try to help everybody in this problem as we move forward with this water issue. And everybody needs to think about that before they start commenting sometimes. It's been a dicey 2 days for me. It's been interesting.
Let's go this way. Drew, any comments or questions right now?
No, not right now.
Okay. Reed?
Tracy said it all.
Yeah, I think right now I don't really need to hear anything. I don't really have anything else to add right now. Only thing, actually, one quick question, Wayne. When was the stormwater fee last set or last adjusted?
2017 was when it went up to 115 from, I think it was 100 in 2005, so it had gone a while. So it's been about 7 years.
All right, thank you.
Scott, questions or comments right now?
Yeah, Robin, are we able to kind of go back to the?
Yep.
I apologize, I didn't write down slide numbers or whatever. You can kind of go back to the beginning for just a second. Well, not that one. No, I'm just kidding. So this slide right here, just to some of the things that I've learned over the years that really kind of bring this to full circle for me and the understanding of what can we as a municipality do is you look at this where we've got 582 retention ponds. And I hear from residents all the time about a specific retention pond or a specific ditch or something like that. Way more often than not, they are not city retention ponds. They belong to those homeowners associations, they belong to private property owners and things like that. There's also a really big misconception that the city has the ability to control the levels of ponds. I hear that one all the time. I heard it a lot a couple of weeks ago. Why isn't the city reducing the level of the pond in my yard or my community? Well, because that doesn't exist. Those ponds belong to your HOA. They're not controlled by the city of Port Orange. So those things kind of, were something that I didn't know about many years ago that I've learned that really kind of, resonate with me to keep those things in mind. The city does have the ability in 5 locations to reduce pond levels, and we do that aggressively, but you can't pump ponds dry either. There are inherent problems with that. So sometimes there'll be, I'll get the question, well, there's still water in that pond. Well, you can't pump it dry. You've got groundwater tables and other factors that can cause the banks to collapse and structurally damage some of those areas. But the other thing I'll just touch real quick on that is we hear about gates. Well, they didn't open the gate, or they didn't. So the gate thing, there's a lot of misconceptions on how that works as well. We are a tidal impacted community. You're a coastal community. When the current in the ocean and the river and the tide is coming in, tide changes every 6 hours, by the way. When that's coming in, if the gates are open in a lot of cases, or the outfalls are open, you are pushing water into the system. So there are times that those things can be operational. When everything's underwater, by the way, that's a different game. Once everything's underwater, like we had with Ian, the gates and all that kind of stuff don't play a factor anymore at that point. Can you go to the next slide? And maybe the next. So this is something, this really illustrates a lot. Is where are the areas? And Wayne, I wanted you to touch base on this for a moment, because one of the things I hear from residents a lot is, well, with all the new development, how come the impact fees aren't going to these areas? And I think there's a misconception that impact fees can just be utilized anywhere in the city for anything. Can you just kind of touch base real quick how impact fees really apply to municipality and why that's not really a big part of a solution for us in these areas?
And you charge impact fees to developers for new capacity. They can only be used for new capacity. You cannot pay to fix things that are there. You can't pay for salaries. You can't pay for equipment. Only new capacity, and it has to be somewhat related to the impact of their project. So you can't go build a pond on the other side of the city that has no impact on the project that's being done. So it's limited to new capacity only, and it has to have a relationship to the impact of their project. So it's similar if you were to build a residential development. Building a school in Deltona doesn't help the students that come to a school in Port Orange. So the reason the fee is used is because it has that broad ability to be used across the board for all the operating cost and maintenance cost, as well as as new capacity also. So it has more flexibility.
And so when we look at this, correct me if I'm wrong here, but when we look at an illustration like this, and you look at all that growth since like you're talking about in the 90s, that's a lot of it is west of Clyde Morris, west of Williamson, west of 95, stuff like that. Those impact fees that were collected there could not be able to go back and be utilized on the far east side of the city in a full amount, kind of a thing, right?
And then the stormwater system, they're actually building their stormwater system. So the developers themselves are taking care of their own. By the code, they're required to detain that 8.5 inches of rain in 24 hours. That's the standard that they're building for. So they're detaining their own water. They're not allowed to have more water run off the site than ran off before they built it in volume. So it can take time to clear, but you can't go from, like, if you dumped a cup of water before the storm, you can't dump a gallon of water off your property after the storm. So it gets into complexities of it, but you'll see we didn't see flooding out here. The only area that flooded was the part of Summer Trees that was the older area that was built prior to those regulations. So the newer stuff is retaining its water to the point that it protected its homes, and then it got into the one canal and functioned the way it was designed. It's the challenge we run into is the older areas that were not built with that kind of standard.
Right. And the next slide kind of draws into this, I believe. Oh, I think there was one more there. Can you go back? This one right here. One of the other things that I was talking to a couple of residents recently was, and you touched on this, Wayne, I just want to reiterate that. The way a lot of the subdivisions in the communities were built in Port Orange 50, 60, and 70 years ago, those standards that's not happening today. And so that's why when you see a lot of the communities that have been built in the last 25 years, or since 1990, I believe you said, right? That's why you see in a lot of those communities, there's 6, 7, 8, some cases like the neighborhood that I live in, I think we're close to 20, if not maybe over 20 retention ponds in that one single neighborhood, where you look at a lot of the neighborhoods on the east side, some of them don't have any retention ponds, because I believe the way back then the idea is that the street becomes somewhat of the retention area in heavy rainfall. And so by design, developers back in the 80s and the 70s, if I understand correctly, it's kind of a closed system, and the idea was when you got the really heavy downpours, you'd get 3 or 4 or 5 inches of water in the street, but not in the home. But over time, obviously, we've seen bigger storms, heavier impacts, and things like that. Is that kind of the idea there? What we're seeing?
A lot of the neighborhoods were built where the streets basically functioned as a retaining pond. The water they would grade the yards to the street. They would get in the street and go down until it found an inlet into the stormwater systems that the cities maintain. So the streets would hold, it rained hard enough, the streets would hold the water. In fact, there's a couple of neighborhoods where that does occur. I think when Fort Lauderdale had that heavy rain last year, one of the quotes I heard, somebody said, well, I've got water in my street. And the answer was, that means it's functioning the way it was designed. Your street was designed to hold the water if you were built in certain eras like that. So that is unfortunately the case. I mean, we evolve development regulations nonstop. There's always something changing in how they did it, whether it's construction techniques. You've learned to do wind loads for hurricanes to keep the roofs on, safer materials in the homes, and the same thing with drainage. The evolution of that, and some of the evolution wasn't just for the flooding. Some of that evolution is related to the pollution as well. So if you don't, the ponds also allow the pollutants to fall out to the bottom. So when the water does go down, you're not putting those pollutants into the tidal creek. So it was a combination of both water quality and water quantity when they started regulating stormwater moving forward, because just running rainwater off into a street and washing the oil and the dirt and everything on the street straight out into the creeks was not good for the environment.
Which we did have a problem with for a long time.
Yeah, Rose Bay had some challenges.
We did.
And my only other comment for now would be just generally speaking is that this is a fee that has not increased since 2017. One of the things that we have noticed as a municipality across the board is that when the voters had an approved mandate to increase minimum wage in 2020 to take it from $8 and whatever it was, $8.55 an hour up to $15 an hour, on top of inflation that we're seeing, everything is costing more money. The materials, the piping, the equipment, the man hours. The municipalities can't print money like the federal government, so we're not immune to that. And so we have to come up with a way incrementally to increase fees, to be able to not only hopefully do better as we move forward, but just to maintain, because all those costs are going up. And I mean, some of the stuff that I know we've seen, whether it's sidewalks or paving or whatever, I mean, some of those things have jumped costs that I don't think anybody could fathom. We've seen major double-digit increases year after year after year in some of those cost things. So, it's important to me that we do everything we can to try to maintain not only the older infrastructure area, or the older areas and the infrastructure in those areas, but at the same time we're maintaining and absorbing the increased cost to just maintain. We're also looking for ways to make it better at the same time. And I don't think I've been part of a major flood mitigation or stormwater mitigation project with the city where the funding sources weren't multiple. I don't think I've seen one that just comes out of this fund. I mean, it's it's grants and state, there's all kinds of things. There's a lot of moving parts to that for sure.
And I didn't go over this, but I think it's important. I know it's frustrating if you live in an area where you have these challenges and you're like, well, why can't you fix it next week? And designing a project, it's got to work. If you rush it through, you could make a problem worse for somebody else. And you also have to get permits, and those permits are not in the control of the city of Port Orange. So there are state, regional, some of these projects are going to require Army Corps of Engineers. We're going to need federal permits to build them. So it's not something, the bigger projects are going to take longer than people are probably going to be very patient for. That doesn't stop us from doing smaller scale, short-term ones, though. We're doing that too.
Which does bring up a point. One point, the Nova Canal. This isn't just water flowing into the Nova Canal from Port Orange Homes. There's no outfall in the lowest part of Daytona Beach, adjacent to the Nova Canal, where they had all that flooding. All that water went into the Nova Canal. If they could have had some relief if they had an outfall in Daytona Beach, but they don't. So they flooded. And then when that water, where did it go? Eventually into the Nova Canal. It came south. It came through. It came to us. So it's shut it down. It's one of the. It's an impact. It's a larger system that impacts all of us. So which is one of the reasons why I got out in front, petitioning for the Army Corps of Engineers study that's going to benefit Daytona Beach, because it's not just going to benefit them. It's going to benefit the region. So we're going to do the things that we need to do locally, but also know that our reach for more regional projects, you know, I've got my eyes on those as well with what my neighbors are doing. And anything I can do to help my neighbor helps us. Anything that helps us helps my neighbor as well. So we're at the south end of the Nova Canal, so it's impactful. There's not a lot we can do about that. There is the outfall at Reed Canal, but water doesn't like to take a left; it likes to go straight.
And then they've got gravity influences there too, which is why what we were thinking. So all the veteran civil engineers around here that've been doing stormwater for years always told me that the Nova was intended to have 6 outfalls into the river when it was designed. There's 3 now, and there were 3 there back in the 50s when everything to the west of it was farmland, and the other 3 never got built. And so
And here
it's
we
not
are.
sufficient to empty it, and the ones that are gravity fed, the river itself will flow south. So if you can force the water into it above the top, it'll go out. But you can't just, if the water's just kind of dribbling into it, when the water's high up, it won't come in. So that was our thought, is to, if we could get the water and pull it and force it out into the river, you can get it away and you're not trapped by the,
Well,
it hasn't been designed, but it gets you something that you're not trapped by the tides. And
of those 6 projects, that's one of the biggest one being that Nova pump station. I know it's probably going to be the most expensive one that we're proposing, but
and if you go to the damage slide,
I also
if you
think
look
that
at
it'll
it,
be the most impactful.
all that area of Sugar Forest and the area north of Dunlawton, it pulls out of that, and then where it benefits going south into the Cambridge area is all that water would have gone down there, but if you pull it out and send it out into the river before it gets there, you're keeping that water from going to the south as well. So
I'm just confirming this is not a typo. So you look at the May 2009 event, right? And 27 inches of rain?
that was that rain for 5 days nonstop.
Okay.
There's
Not-
some of the
not
numbers
over-
were
not
over
over
30.
a day and a half
Yeah,
like
that
we had
was just
there.
rained all. It was that week of May. It just rained every day.
And it wasn't hurricane season, so we didn't have the wind and the tides.
Well, I understand. I know
pushing
that.
it back, yeah,
well, I know it wasn't a
was-
hurricane.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I just want to make sure that's not a typo. That's 27.
Yeah, no, it
because
was-
that can
it-
be misleading when you're looking at that.
It was over 30 inches. in
Reed,
some
just because
areas.
you weren't old enough to drive yet doesn't mean it didn't happen.
I'm doing the math on this. I was driving then. Yeah.
Barely. Barely. Wayne, do you have anything to add to the presentation?
Unless you want me to go in some of the short, I kind of skipped over some of the stuff that we're doing now, because I do get the frustration of, we'll fix something now. We were, during the summer, we had a bunch of heavy rain at the end of July and early August, and we had, doing best you can with the silver lining of that, we sent crews out with, we have 4 portable pumps that we can move around, and we put them in different areas and put them out to see what they could do pumping down ponds. As Scott was saying, you can't dry them out. You got to get them certain levels, but we don't have permits to dry them. There's environmental impacts they won't let us do, but we tested them. We did enough testing that we made some people mad enough that they came out in the middle of the night and turned the pumps off because they didn't like the noise they made. So then we tried one that was a more silent pump, but that still was making people mad. So you make some people happy on one side and some people mad on the other side. There are other areas where we maybe hadn't communicated with people, and the hurricane is, in some cases, brings people together. And so in the Sleepy Hollow neighborhood, there was a property in the corner. The owners were nice enough, we were able to work out to more clearly get around the corner. We immediately then were able to get into that ditch and clean it. So we have much more good access there. So thanks to the owners in that area and our staff, we went back out and kept trying to find ways to work together with people to help. We've been looking at a number of ponds around the city and trying not to get into too many technical words, but basically the size of the pipes that bring water to the ponds and the size of the pipes that let them go out, whether it's a weir or whatever piece of equipment. We've been looking at, is there any way to upsize the entrance and exit of some of these ponds to see if we can get water in the ponds quicker so that it's not backing up in the pipe. We've described it once before. If you take a straw and put it in a bowl and pour a gallon of water, it'll eventually work its way through, but it'll back up on the top end, and that's where these people live. So if you can open it up in the bottom, the water gets out of it quicker, it doesn't back up as much. So Sleepy Hollow is one of those neighborhoods where, as it's waiting to get down into the water, it just backs up in the streets. So the intent was to find a way to get it into the ponds quicker. We were looking at a couple in the area of Sugar Forest and doing those kind of things. As we've been running the pump tests, we've been putting people out in the river in kayaks, and they're testing to see what the pump does at high tide and low tide, just to see. One of the things you don't want to do is pump it all out into the water and then have the tide pushing into someone else's neighborhood and flood that. So we've been out there testing those things as well to see what we can do. Looking at culverts to see where there's undersized, talking to willing property owners who may be willing to sell properties or work with us. So we're building a database so that stuff's going on. Robin goes out with the guys probably once or twice a week to different neighborhoods. A lot of this does require just one-on-one in your area. It's not so much a regional solution as a backyard solution. And so we'll get out there and take a look at that when people call. So they're out there constantly, made a lot of new friends throughout the city doing that. And so I think that the FaceTime of talking to people in their backyards and understanding the situations is something important for us to do in the short term as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you've got nothing else to present, we'll come back to us in a minute. Why don't we hear from anybody here that wants to speak to the item? Come on up. You gotta come up. No, you got. They gotta hear you on TV.
I just have a quick question for Wayne. One of the things I looked at was you apply for a lot of grants. So for a minimal investment by a homeowner, which is $15, you can leverage that money, which I think people aren't aware of, to get a lot more in grant funding because you have more matching when you have that. So I think that's something that's missing really clearly for the public to see, is that with that extra $600,000, if you get a match or a double match, you're going to end up with an additional $120,000 for my $15 investment. So it's something to be thinking about with grant writing and regional grants and federal grants.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's absolutely important. In fact, that was one of our big selling points on the corrugated pipe replacement is we're going to do it anyway. You just help us double it up. We can do it twice as fast if you'll give us some more money.
Just
So-
do me a favor, say your name into the microphone for the
Oh,
record.
okay, Louise Chapman.
Hasn't changed since you came up earlier.
But yes, because I write a lot of federal and state grants, and that's the best way that you can sell my investment of this will turn around and be a whole lot more for the community and for myself as well, because that $15 or $30 over a couple of years can
Absolutely.
become 90 or 120 without us having to pay for it. And I think that was missing in your budget slide, so.
Thank you. We keep getting better every time we touch.
There are a lot of aspects to it, and that's one moving part. I know that when we walk into Tallahassee and I'm asking a legislator for money, and we sit there and say we've already funded the planning and engineering portion of it, they're a whole lot more willing to fund these things when we're further down the road as well. Anyone else? Who else? Come on up.
My name is Marvin Foster. I've lived here in Port Orange for 70 years, all my life. My folks had the 40 acres out behind Lowe's. It's all developed now. Yorktown took part of it. But my question, I guess, is directed towards Wayne. I've noticed in the letter you're omitting vacant land and vacant lots, acreage, and I just question was why?
They don't have any paved or impervious surface, so that's how we calculate it, by what percentage of your grass is paved over. And so the fee is set to single family unit, which is 3,000 square feet of paved. So if you have undeveloped land, you're not charged until you develop it.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
That's a great question.
Great question, because that's a legal standard we have to live with, but great explanation. Thank you, Wayne. Who else?
Anybody?
Anybody with Janice?
Anybody but Janice, okay. You beat me to that one,
Council
Scott.
Mayor. Janice Nixon, 831 Second Street. Most of you know that we did flood through Ian.
Mhm.
First time in 25 years. It's amazing what 2 to 3 inches of water will do to your home. And I know a lot of other people flooded way worse than we did. I don't want to see anybody have to go through that again. So if $1.25 a month from me is going to help to improve that, I'm all for it. I also want to suggest to residents that while we look to the city due to the big stuff, we as residents have to do the little stuff, and you have to do everything within your power to protect your own property. And there's all kinds of options out there. If you know the rains are coming and the hurricanes are coming, there's all kinds of things you can do to try to protect your home and keep the water from coming in. So I just encourage everybody to do that, and thank you for your time.
Thanks,
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Janice.
Anybody else? Back to council. And Wayne, I just want to play off of the point Janice made. It blows my mind the number of contractors who do yard work, and these are supposed to be the professionals, and they blow the debris into the road because you know what you know where it's going, into the drainage system. And I know that we can't be out there enforcing every little law in the books. This is more an awareness thing, but you're not supposed to be doing that. Whether you're a contractor or just the person mowing a yard who blows their yard waste out into the road, first of all, it's not real attractive. But second of all, you have the ability to make your yard feed off itself. You have all that nourishment that you can feed your yard with, and you eliminate the need to fertilize it to the degree you need to when you're blowing all that away. But when you're blowing yard waste into the drainage, where's it into the road? Where's it going to go? The drainage system. So, I'm not trying to help neighbors have a reason to not like other neighbors, but it is a point of conversation. And I think for some people, it's just one of those, they never really thought about it, because if they did, I doubt that they would do it. But our commercial contractors, they know better. They know better. So just a thought. Comments, council, other questions? Scott?
Just a quick comment. I appreciate Ms. Chapman's comment, and she's absolutely right about that. And one of the other things that this city has been very good at in the past is what we hear the buzzwords a lot in Tallahassee are shovel ready. And by that, what I mean is when we go to Tallahassee and we're fighting for state dollars, you never know what the governor and what the legislator are going to put out there, what's going to be available. And of course, you've got over 400 cities across the state all fighting for a lot of the same things. But our city has done extremely well time and time again by having projects that are, quote, shovel ready, which means we've done the design, we've got the concept, we just need the funding, but it's sitting on that shelf, it's ready to go. So a lot of times what we find in Tallahassee is because our staff has done that and kind of gotten a little bit ahead of that. Sometimes funding that you didn't expect was going to be available is available. And so that's why it's important too to fund some of these studies and designs and concepts and the whole process that goes along with that, to be ready. Because even though we might think, okay, we might not be able to get all this funding together until 2030 for a project, for example, all of a sudden 2028 something comes up and it's there, we got to be ready to jump on that and take advantage of it for our residents. And so that's a big part of the process as well, that kind of was all happening through staff's offices and their efforts and things like that. So we try to be very realistic in our timelines as to where we think we can, get the funding based on kind of reading the tea leaves out of Tallahassee and where all the funding sources are going to come together. But we hope that a lot of times things will happen quicker. So,
amen to that. Drew, final comments or questions?
No. Well, one of the other things we could add, taking some personal responsibility. I see it all the time, when we're driving around before storms or checking things out or making preparations. People will trim their trees or cut them down and stack them over the storm drain. And you can't do that. That you are basically eliminating that from the system, and it's not going to do. I've seen bag debris. They'll rake leaves and put bag debris there, or they just stack the cut debris in the storm drain because they
forget
don't
a
measure the
hurricane
yard
just
up.
during an afternoon thunderstorm.
Don't do that. And if you have somebody trimming your yard, don't let them do that.
Okay.
Don't block the storm drains.
Tracy, final comments or questions?
I want to thank Public Utilities for doing an excellent job right before the storm. I mean, Sugar Forest, I've been going down multiple times after the storms and seeing water standing in the road and standing in the gutters. This past storm, thankfully, we didn't get a major storm, but we did have the afternoon thunders that rolled in and drizzled all day. It's the first time that Sugar Forest had nothing in the gutters before and after the storm. You have no idea how big my smile was to
Tracy,
drive
knock
through
on
there.
wood when you say that.
Oh, I know. I mean,
that's
it's
the
impressive.
neighborhood adjacent to mine, okay?
And going over to Jackson Street and literally seeing the canal that had just been freshly cleared bone dry. Had the photos and the timeline to prove it. Bone dry. So thank you for staff. I mean, it works when things are going right. And thank you for what you guys have been doing, because it's paying off. Thank you.
Reed, final comments or questions?
Well, it's no secret my house was one of the ones that did flood. I live in Sleepy Hollow, and so I was one of those unfortunate people. Some of my neighbors were way worse than I was, but you know, Tracy actually just said what I was going to say. I'm thankful for our stormwater staff and everyone for what they do. You see that first picture in that slide, you see people, you know, waist deep in water out there doing this. It's a very complex system, and you know, with the way things have been, the economy since getting out of COVID and inflation and stuff, you want to make sure that not only do we have the money to do what we're doing existing, but we also want to have future projects and be able to fund those. And we want to be able to go with as much ammunition to Tallahassee. You know, every year since I've been elected, I've taken that trip and gone up there to advocate, and we've been able to bring back matching dollars for those corroded pipes. You know, and those are things that little by little help. I appreciate staff's effort, the approach to this. I love that we have kind of a small and long-term plan, and I'm glad to know that we're going to get something for our money out of it. So I'm, you know, very supportive of this.
With that, on Resolution 23-31, call the roll.
Councilman Grubbs,
Yes.
Councilman Bastian,
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Foley,
Yes.
Mayor Burnett.
Yes, 5-0. With that, the public hearing portion of our meeting is closed. The regular agenda portion of our meeting is coming up, but we've been at it a little while, so I'm going to say we take a 9-minute break, 9-minute recess. That'll also allow any interested parties to exit without disturbing things. So we are at recess for 9 minutes. We are back. Regular agenda of the meeting. Item 21, first reading of ordinance number 2023-09, amendment to Chapter 54, Article 5 of the Police Pension Fund of the Code of Ordinances. Ordinance number 2023-09 is an ordinance of the City of Port Orange, Volusia County, Florida, amending Chapter 54, Article 5, the Police Pension Fund, amending Section 54-122, definitions, adding a new definition for domestic partner, and adding participant to the definition of police officer, creating a new section 54-132.5, benefits payable in the event of a participant killed in the line of duty, providing for codification, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing severability, and providing for an effective date.
Move to approve ordinance number 2023-09.
Second.
We have a motion, proper second. The item's open on the floor for discussion. Wayne, what have we got?
If you have any questions, Assistant Manager McKinney is here to answer them.
Come on up for a minute, John.
Council, do we have any comments or questions for Mr. McKinney on this one?
John, could you briefly explain what we're doing here?
Absolutely, Mayor, Council. On April 4th, 2023, the City Council approved the Memorandum of Understanding with the International Union of Police Association and the Police Benevolent Association for a line of duty death benefit. We followed very closely the state of Florida's FRS line of duty death benefit with a few exceptions. One of them being we defined what a domestic partner is, and we also clarified the benefits payable in the event of a participant killed in the line of duty. The delay in this has been, we've been waiting on the actuarial cost impact. We've received this and we're ready to proceed. The estimated additional cost per year is just over $50,000. Both the IUPA and PBA collective bargaining agreement groups have both voted for approval of this.
Worth every penny.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate it, John.
Any questions for Mr. McKinney? There being none, would anyone here care to speak to the item? There being none, back to council. Final comments? Call the roll. This one makes sense.
Councilman Grubbs?
Yes.
Councilman Bastian?
Yes.
Councilman Stiltner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Foley?
Yes.
Mayor Burnett?
Yes, 5-0. Additional items, item 22, City Attorney Report.
Nothing further than
Excellent report, thank you. Item 23, City Manager.
At the risk of going through this, but I do want to announce, and it's an interesting thing with our Tuesdays, but the first thing I want to announce is that Steve Parnell has been made the permanent Public Utilities Director. He's here tonight, so you've seen him here before, but he's now officially in that role. And we have now filled all the leadership positions in the city, so every position, every department head, every spot is now full.
If you're going to mention his name, he's got to come up here.
I think the greatest thing so the luck of him on Tuesday night, so the first night that I announced this, we had a water main break out on the west side of town, and we had a contractor working on it's a subcontractor working on that storage facility across from Crane Lakes, hit one of our water mains and knocked out water to a large section of the west side. And there's precautionary boil water notice in that area. We've sent all that information to you, got it all out on the internet, so it's probably 36 to 40 something hours of boil water until we get all the samples and tested and cleaned. But it was a contractor that hit it. It wasn't a city crew or a break on its own. It was hit in construction.
That doesn't make it stink any less. But
the benefit, so to go back to and I know it's bad timing on it, but the positive, so Steve's been with us a long time. I've known him for years, since I was upstairs in CD, and he's worked his way through the entire organization and reached the top position. But one of the big positive things is like the other directors that you've seen recently, they take us out in the field to see the people doing the work. And I've now been into the water plant a couple times, the sewer plant, and you're getting to meet people who are out there and doing great things every day. And we're finding out, while we were out in the sewer plant the other day, some of the great ideas that people who work for us are coming up with on their own, money-saving ways to do things better out there. We have employees who could choose to not do that, but are choosing to say, hey, look, I think there's a better way to do it. and particularly in that plant, which is we need to get some tender loving care out there and help them out and work on it, and that's why you keep seeing a number of items related to improvements. And so in just a very short period of time that he's been in the interim, he has had us out in the field meeting people, talking to people. They've had an employee appreciation lunch that we've been a part of. So just like you've seen with the public works staff as well, you're starting to see the same thing out of public utilities, and I think both of those departments are going to be much stronger going forward for that.
I must have missed that lunch invite.
Wayne, quick question in regards, because I got a message, I checked on the thing. So in regards to the water main break and the contractor that did it, were there any businesses that were forced to close, restaurants or anything, because they couldn't flush the toilets or didn't have water? Is that?
There's a large number of businesses impacted out there.
So is somebody is that contractor responsible to get with that? I mean, I'm just posing the question because I got a message and they asked.
Mayor, council, what a way to welcome a guy.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
I had a hurricane. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That's the way we do it.
Steve
Welcome
Parnell,
to the frying
Utilities.
pan, right?
The contractor that did hit the water main is taking full responsibility for the break. They are mobilizing the MOT. We are going to have to shut down one lane of Taylor Road overnight, so they are mobilizing the MOT overnight, and they're going to start the repair immediately. Volusia County has been out there since that's County Road. Their inspector's on site, and he's advising them on how to proceed forward. We did have a brief interruption of service, so that's where you see the boil water notice. A couple of the restaurants were affected, but water was restored immediately. So they just take the proper precautions for a boil water notice. Should not affect business.
Okay, so it was brief.
About an hour.
Okay.
About an hour.
That's-
12-inch water
that's pretty
main.
brief.
12-inch water main that was flowing a lot of water.
Okay.
Drew, it was just interesting with a hair cuttery coming next door asking how they're going to get the dye out of the hair.
I didn't even think of that.
What happened.
Didn't
in my
even think of
plaza.
that one. Yeah.
That's great.
Go to Publix and get bottled water.
It was awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm just
Thank you.
curious. Thank you for the explanation.
Wayne, you have anything else for us?
No, sir, that's it.
Council committee reports, River CTPO, Vice Mayor Reed Foley.
Not a whole lot to report of. There was an interesting presentation about FDOT. They have a semi-truck parking plan that they're working on, which involves a little bit of our land. Currently, I didn't know this, on I-4 between here and Tampa, there's only 36 spaces for semi-trucks to park along the interstate. And they think demand's going to be 750 by 2025. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But otherwise, nothing really to report from this meeting.
Okay. Fire Pension Board.
Assets are up to 39.5 million on that. Quarter, they were up 3.3. And fiscal year to date, 13.7. Found it interesting also to learn that the city has contributed fiscal year to date $2.8 million to that plan. So,
And
we will be having a presentation from James Moore just to consider hiring a independent, like a separate audit of the plan just to get a deeper look at it. So that presentation will occur at the next meeting.
Okay. And Police Pension Board, Drew.
Police plan. Okay. Very good fiscal year to date. 15.6% net of fees. And of course that greatly exceeds the fund's 6.95% assumed rate of return. Portfolio value very recently, August 21st, of $57.23 million. The 3-year average, net of fees, 9.38%. So that plan continues to do well. Also welcome the new police officer trustee, Officer Brian Schnibben, and we are in receipt of the state premium tax funds, just shy of $584,000.
It's a good year.
Yep.
Terrific. We will be back here again tomorrow night. Until then, everybody have a good night. And Bo, I was wondering if I was going to get an updated schedule.
Well, I went to see what you see up there first.